Hi everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Desteni I Process Live Google Hangout. We actually started this Hangout once before a few minutes ago, but we were told that everyone could only see a blue screen and they couldn't see us. So we're giving it another try here. Physical body support here at the Desteni I Process channel, where our guests and participants come on to share themselves in relation to various physical body experiences, diseases, struggles that they've had, where they share how they've assisted and supported themselves through the Desteni I Process and the Desteni I Process tools. In this hangout, we're going to talk about OCDs, and specifically an OCD titled Dermatillomania, or Compulsive Skin Picking. And to talk about this topic, we have invited Kim from Canada. Hey, Kim.
Hi.
Very cool that you could join us. And as always, I have to make the disclaimer that we're not here as medical professionals or professionals in any other capacity. We're simply here sharing our personal experiences. So if you do have a medical issue, we suggest that you seek out a physician to discuss that with them, as that we're not qualified to talk about such issues. So let's get straight into it, Kim. What is dermatillomania? Can you explain to us what it is?
Yes, dermatillomania is it's a skin picking disorder. It involves compulsively picking at your own skin. It falls under the umbrella of obsessive compulsive disorders, in that it is a compulsion which you act out obsessively, and it feels like it's beyond your control to stop. It's also known as you said, compulsive skin picking, CSP, and then I've heard it referred to also as a body-focused repetitive disorder, or a BRFD, which includes also things such as cutting, nail picking, nail biting, or trichotillomania, which is hair pulling. So oftentimes people who have dermatillomania will pick at their own skin. Sometimes there's a particular area of the body that's focused on, or sometimes it's just all over. And skin picking is present in everybody. I think it crosses over into dermatillomania when it is out of control or seemingly out of control, and when it prevents you from basically participating in your life normally. It actually encroaches on your regular participation in your life and things you enjoy doing.
Right, and I want to remind our viewers that you're able to ask questions here during the live broadcast. If you're on YouTube, you have to click on where it says be part of the conversation, and that will take you to our Google account or our Google Plus page, where you can type in your question for Kim or post a comment if you do have experiences with OCDs or with dermatillomania specifically. But Kim, can you explain a little bit more of how did you discover that you had this disorder?
Yes. What's interesting about this disorder is that it's something that you don't necessarily even know. You're not necessarily aware that you have it. In the research that I've done, it's indicated that the condition presents itself quite early on in life. For me, I'm aware that I suffered from it from at least the ages of 6 or 7, and the only reason that I know that is because when I look back at pictures from school or just family photos, I see that I have sores on my face, on my arms, so I know that I had it at a very young age, but I only became aware of it later on in life. I became aware of it on a kind of very personal level when I was reaching my teens, and the reason for that is because at that age you start to become more aware of your physical body and your appearance, because your interests are shifting more into friends and social life, how you look, starting to be interested in relationships. So I started realizing that what I was doing to myself was something that was causing negative reactions, was kind of an obstacle in my way into what I wanted to do in terms of be a social person, have a boyfriend, have friends, go out, you know, dress up. And so if I remember, like, if there was a school dance and I wanted to wear a certain outfit, I wouldn't be able to wear it because I would have sores that I was trying to cover up. Whereas before that, I wouldn't have even thought about it really, because you don't realize that it's something not normal. Um, and then a little later, when I was in college, I was in a psychology class, and we were discussing abnormal psychology, and the teacher had started talking about obsessive compulsive disorder, and that was a huge moment for me, because as she was speaking, it was like she was describing exactly what I was experiencing, and that's when I realized that mental conditions, you know, I became aware of disorders and realized that I had one, that this was in fact present in my life.
So what was it exactly that you would do? Was it specifically your arms and your face, and you would like pick in it?
Yeah, it would just be, for me, like if I were to just touch my skin, if there was anything that wasn't smooth, I would have the compulsion to remove that. And if I didn't remove it, I would develop extreme anxiety and stress. Um, and so it's like you feel that there is something present on or in your skin that needs to be removed. And if you don't, you can't function. It's like if you don't remove it, it would be like ants crawling all over you. You know, it becomes all you can think about. And then once you do remove it, however, some would be like popping zits, peeling scabs, peeling dry skin, but going too far. But then once you do, you know, pick at your skin, then you're left with obviously something worse than before. So your internal experience is like, okay, I've dealt with this problem, which was the blemish or the inconsistent part of the skin, but now you're left with something worse than before. You're left with a big mark, a sore. It's could get infected, you know, all this stuff. So then, before the actual picking, you're gonna have the anxiety and all the emotional and energetic experiences that causes you to act out the compulsion. And then after you act it out, there's all the reactions to what have I done? Now I have to deal with this. Now you have to heal. And then even during the healing process, the skin is going to be rough. And so that's pretty much the cycle that one would go through, would be basically responding to anxieties or stress, pressure, to act out the compulsion, acting it out, and then dealing with the consequences of it, and then it just cycles.
Right. And you were saying that you started discovering it when you were experiencing negative reactions from other people, but throughout your life and when you were a child, did no one notice it otherwise or comment on it until you were a teenager?
Nobody ever commented on it. I remember once in second grade, which I would be 7 or 8, and my teacher screamed at me because I had a sore on my face, and she was like, "You always have a sore on your face. What's your problem?" And I remember becoming defensive, but that's my thing, you know. That's like what I do, and I felt exposed, and I felt like even then, even with her screaming at me, I didn't feel like what I was doing was wrong. I felt like defensive, like I wanted to protect this thing that I had. And after that, nobody ever commented, because it's kind of taboo. It's like, imagine somebody with acne. You're not going to go up to them and say, like, "Oh, look at your face, what's wrong?" You know, or somebody with a rash or something like that. It's not acceptable in society to point that out. It's not polite or whatever. So maybe when I was a child, before kids learned the socialization, there may have been comments, but not really. That was not an aspect. So it's kind of like you just know, people are aware, but they're not saying anything. But the fact that they're not saying anything before you're even aware that it's a disorder doesn't help in the kind of bringing it out there. So that's how it's able to remain unknown. It's able to stay in the realm of like not knowing, is that you don't have indicators from your environment reflecting to you that something's wrong. It really, for me, it started internally. I was the one who was like starting to judge myself basically, and I accepted that judgment as just natural. But then I started realizing that this is something that that maybe I shouldn't be doing, and maybe I could stop. And then when you try to stop and you're not able to, that's when it's like, whoa, this is something bigger than what I previously thought.
And for those who aren't familiar with dermatillomania, what are some of the consequences? You talked a little bit before about that when you go into puberty and you want to start having relationships and stuff, how did it affect your life?
Well, it's actually something with anybody who experiences something like this. Your life becomes a coping mechanism. So you find out ways to hide it, to go around it. I hid it for a long time. I was able to, with makeup, with lights off, with clothing, with not going out during the day. I mean, there was times where I would only go out with friends at night because I knew that then they wouldn't notice my skin. So your life, so that's a consequence in your life, is that your life, when you decide to live with it, your life becomes second to, the disorder is the ruler, so you'll let yourself pick your skin and everything, and then the rest of your day will involve avoiding having to face people. So maybe a consequence would also be not participating in events that I wanted to because I had, gone through a picking session, or not wearing clothes that I wanted to, wearing long sleeves in the summer. So that creates a whole bunch of reactions, and it's isolating, and it's frustrating, and it's confusing because you don't understand why you're doing it. And then there's the physical consequences of scars, infection, which, in extreme cases you can cause harm to yourself enough to require medical attention. But just you're harming your own skin, that's a consequence in itself.
So how about the compulsive part of it, and also how dermatillomania relates to other OCDs? Can you share a little bit about that? Because I know that you've researched it.
Yeah. So with the compulsion part, the OCD aspect, that would be like anybody who has obsessive compulsive disorder is going to feel a certain way within themselves if they don't act the disorder out. Dermatillomania would be the same, and that's the compulsion part, where if I am in a situation where I'm unable to, because I have at least the control where I'm not going to, in the middle of a presentation or something, start doing it. So I obviously have a little bit of control where I can stop myself at work and in situations like that. But if that goes on too long, it's like it changes your personality. You become agitated and angry with people, and irritated, and not being able to function, not being able to focus. And when I've done my research on obsessive compulsive disorder, I've seen that what people who experience not being able to act out their compulsions, whether it's cleaning or the germ washing, there's a couple typical OCD habits. If they're not able to act them out, and the compulsion to act them out is the same as as dermatillomania, as compulsive skin picking. It's the same experience. And then after you act them out, you get the relief of, okay, like I've satisfied, I've done what I've had to do to make myself feel better, and then there's the realization of what you've just done is now detrimental to yourself. All of those things are the same between OCD and CSP.
Right. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how you've then assisted and supported yourself through the Desteni material. But how long was it that you had dermatillomania? Or would you say that it's like an ongoing thing, like kind of like alcoholism, where it never really disappears?
I hope I'm able to walk through it. I don't think, you know, it may be something that you have for the rest of your life that you have to manage in terms of, you know, I can't really think about what it would be like to not have it. So, but I had it since, like I said, I was a very young child, and then through my teens, and then once I was in my mid-20s, I decided that I really need to apply myself to stop, because before that, I just felt that it's something that would work itself out, that I just would live my life normally and it would go away, and I would ignore it. And then after enough time passes, you realize that this is not just going to go away. That's when I was in my mid-20s and I made the decision that I needed to take steps to stop. But that's when I started doing research, and I was confronted with the fact that there is not a lot of research out there about the disorder, and I was in a position then where I didn't have insurance, and so I couldn't afford therapy or the medications that were promoted. They promote the same medications for OCD are used in compulsive skin picking, and also as just a personal thing is that I was not comfortable with the idea of taking medication, not before I at least tried everything else. But that's just a personal decision. Everybody can make their own choice. But the main solution is medication. Secondary solutions include behavioral kind of training, almost like behavioral, like Pavlov's dogs, sort of.
Yeah.
Where you're just changing the behavior, and that I found ineffective because the behavior was the outflow of the disorder.
So do you mean that you actually sought help in the system, and these were the options that you were left with? Either behavior modification or medicine?
Exactly. So I felt very discouraged and frustrated because I felt like there was nothing else out there that could help me, and that it was something that I didn't understand. So it's really difficult to treat something or to consider trying to help yourself when you don't understand at all what it is that you're going through and what it is that you're experiencing.
Right, and I want to also, like I was saying before, ask you about how you then finally found Desteni and found that you could assist and support yourself through the Desteni tools. But before the Hangout started, you told me something that I found very interesting in that, and you told me that you've discovered this through the process that you work with Desteni, is that you realized that for you, this actually isn't a disorder, it's something else. So do you want to share that with us?
Yes. Okay, so Anna and I were discussing before the Hangout, and I was telling her about how when I was researching obsessive compulsive disorder, I saw the similarities, and with cutting too, I saw similarities between CSP and cutting, which is people who will cut their skin with a razor blade or other artifact. And I was able to relate to that, but it was when I was watching documentaries about drug addicts, specifically heroin addicts, that when I saw their process of needing the drug and doing the drug, and then their process of withdrawal after not having the drug, that's what I was able to most closely relate to. That was like seeing myself on a screen in a documentary, but it was a documentary about a heroin addict. And that's when I realized that this is an addiction. It's something that, you know, what I've been able to deduce is that when I participate in it, maybe a chemical is released into my blood, and I'm addicted to that chemical, and so when I
Like
participate in,
adrenaline, for example.
yeah, exactly. So I don't know the science behind it, but I do know that we are, chemical beings, and there is a chemistry that goes on inside of us. So that's the kind of like the logic that I walked to be able to see this as an absolute addiction, and almost like I'm injecting heroin into my system when I do it.
So how did that change the way that you saw the compulsion or this need to pick your skin? That you went from seeing it as a disorder to seeing it as an addiction?
It was a huge realization because when you consider something to be a disorder, it's kind of like, oh, well, I was born with it. There's nothing I can do. It's just a part of me. It's in my genes. And that may be somewhat true. But once I started to look at it and change my perspective and see it as an addiction, I saw it as something that I could take responsibility for to stop. Something that I wasn't simply born with, but I had created myself. And that, I mean, like I said before, it was this huge lack of understanding. It was like just this huge dark unknowing. And through the Desteni I process, I have been slowly able to shed light on what it is I'm in fact experiencing, how I created it, and how it functions within me. So realizing that I can look at this as an addiction started to make me treat it like an addiction, but also understand where the urges come from, and that, for example, the urges aren't necessarily something I should listen to, aren't necessarily something that are good for me, and I could more rationalize that this is something that I need to wean myself off of. I understood that there's going to be a withdrawal. I mean, when I was watching the documentaries on heroin addicts, they went through some serious withdrawal. And watching them go through that and coming out on the other side was inspiring to me, because I thought, well, I might have to go through this too. Many times in a day, every time that I don't submit to the compulsion, I'm going to have to go through a mini withdrawal. When you're armed with this information and you're prepared for it, it makes it a lot easier to push yourself through it. And like with a drug, if you slowly stop taking, because in a lot of like a heroin addict will be given a lesser version of heroin to kind of wean their body off. So I can see my disorder now as something that I need to be weaned off of, where I don't necessarily have to think about it in terms of I do it or I don't do it, like I have to stop cold turkey, but instead I can slowly walk a gentle process, and when I stop myself throughout the day, go through the mini withdrawal, and then the next time it's a bit easier, and the next week, and the next year, it's something that your body becomes less and less dependent on. And so it's another perspective and aspect that I've been working on now and working with.
Yeah, it's fascinating that you've seen this correlation. I could also imagine that a heroin addiction is usually seen as like the worst kind of addiction, and how difficult it is for people to stop. And then seeing that, well, okay, if these really hardcore addicted people can stop, then maybe I can too. Like that, there's also that similarity, because I could imagine that when you have an OCD or a compulsive disorder, that it feels like I can never stop. It's impossible. Like it's in me. So that's quite interesting. Kim, we have a couple of questions here. We have a question in Russian, and I think it's in Russian, and we don't understand Russian. So if you want to put a question or a comment, if you could please put it in English, then we'll be able to answer it. So I'm going to delete that. And then we have a question from Mats in relation to something you were saying before. He's saying, would you say that skin picking can be compared to biting your nails? And I know that that's something you actually mentioned as part of like the same kind of disorder.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely see them as related. I never had the nail biting problem, but I in the research that I've done, I've seen that people do that because with skin picking and nail biting, this is something that everybody does.
Right.
And it's only when it becomes out of control and starts to interfere in your life that it's a disorder. So the nail biting, it's people go way past the limit of what you should be doing with your fingernails until they can't use their fingers anymore. It's too painful. And I'm involved in a couple of Dermatillomania compulsive skin picking websites, and people who are doing this to their nails are in these groups as well, so the research and investigation that they've done to help them find solutions for themselves has led them to the same place as skin pickers.
Right.
So yeah, I absolutely see them as the same and related.
So in relation to your realization that this disorder is actually an addiction, I've also found in relation to addictions that one of the most important steps in relation to stepping out of the addiction and stopping the addiction is exactly as you said, getting to understand it. How does it work? What mechanisms are involved? And as you've also shared, there is an actual cycle, like a cyclical that you would go through. Could you share with us how you came to this realization through walking the Desteni I process and, for example, supporting yourself through writing? Can you share that process of how you came to understand this addiction for yourself?
Yes. Okay, so with the Desteni I process, I began writing on a daily basis, or writing as much as possible. And only in doing that was I able to document and so realize the fact that there was a cyclic aspect. There's a large cycle and a kind of small cycle, and the large cycle is where it could be over the course of weeks where you'll go through some really hard weeks, and then after that it's almost like it's gone. And that cycle, I realized, was helping my own self-sabotage, because every time I would get through the hard weeks and then go into the up slope of the cycle, I would think, oh, I'm cured, it's done, and I would feel better. And when you're trying to apply solutions in your life, you have to be consistent, especially with this type of addiction, where consistency is key. But when you feel that you're in the upslope of the cycle and everything's fine, you just kind of let it all go, and then the next thing you know, you're back in to the downside of the cycle again. So there's that kind of cycle that I was not aware of, and that cycle really helps the addiction stay in place. And then the other cycle was the smaller cycles, which are where you would feel the compulsion, act it out, have the aftermath, which are the reactions, the judgments, all of that, which fuel your next compulsion, your next session, because it's like a build-up. So you're building up all the internal emotional experiences, you're releasing them through acting out the compulsion, and through acting out the compulsion, you're basically jump-starting the next cycle to simply have another compulsive session. Because at the minute that you stop, you feel that relief, and the next second, it's like, oh my God, what have I done? And you're just, what have I done? Look at my skin and the reactions, and then you get invited to your friend's house and you don't want to go because of how you look, and now you have judgment, and now you want to pick your skin again, or bite your nails, or do whatever it is that you do to erase or take away all this negativity that's inside of you. So those are the two ways in which, I saw that the disorder fuels itself in cycles.
And that's fascinating, because I see that with a lot of addictions, or even like mental problems in general, that most people would experience, like feeling depressed or having a bad day, that we kind of tend to think that it's something that just happens. Like, for example, oh, I'm picking my skin, I don't know why I'm doing it, but I can't stop. And then when you start actually writing about it, you realize that there are these very specific mechanisms involved. So how did
Yeah.
that realizing those mechanisms and also the thought patterns and the reactions involved, how did that assist you to eventually start stopping participating in this compulsive behavior?
So the realizing has helped me because when you are in a compulsion, it's so overwhelming that you think that the only way to get out of it is to act out the compulsion. When you understand more and when you, through the writing, I've made realizations, it has given me a platform of support to, when I'm in that moment, to be able to see more, to talk to myself, and to, for example, reason with myself, because you're in a completely irrational space when you're about to start picking your skin or participating in your disorder. You're in an irrational space where you're not thinking, and like you said, you think, oh my God, I can't stop. The Desteni I process, the tools, the writing have shined a bit of a light of realization where I've been able to give myself some tools for when I am in those moments to talk to myself and say, for example, this isn't going to last forever. I know that this is going to stop, and when I come out on the other side of it, if I don't submit, I'm going to feel so empowered. And then I'll do that, and it's interesting how easily one forgets, because maybe I'll stop one time, and then the next time it's like that memory of having success in the past is completely obliterated. The writing helps to keep that present, helps to keep that in the moment, so that when I am feeling another compulsion coming on, I can say, remember what happened last time? You were so empowered, look at the scales. Do you want that, or do you want to satisfy this compulsion in the moment and feel good for maybe 5 seconds, maybe while it's happening? So you're really able to introduce common sense into yourself in a moment where you're otherwise completely irrational. And that has helped me a lot.
Can you share how this then is different from other behavior modification techniques that you've experienced in the past?
Yeah, it's very different in that behavior modification would simply be preventing myself from doing it, just looking at the behavior, which, I would in those moments say, this is impossible. I can't just stop. If I could just stop, I wouldn't have this problem. That's the problem, is that you can't just stop. So you train your behavior. So there's a series of exercises you would go through to be able to simply stop the behavior. What I've realized is that the behavior is simply an outflow of the disorder. It's a symptom.
Yeah.
The disorder is an internal experience. It's how you feel within yourself, and the energies, the feelings and emotions that are existent within you. That's the problem. And the skin picking is actually what we've been using as a solution, as an escape from these internal problems. So with the Desteni tools, I've seen how to deal with the internal problems, the internal source of the disorder, instead of just looking at the physical outplays. So if I were to just stop picking my skin, I'm still going to feel the same way inside, and that's the problem, is this internal state that you just feel like you have to escape. So the Desteni tools have also given me another outlet, because if you just stop the behavior, it's going to come out another way. Because if I didn't have skin picking, I can tell you right now, I would be an alcoholic or a drug addict, or I have seen myself lean towards other escapes that give me the same kind of release and forgetting, and whether it's any of the escapes that people use. So I wouldn't want to simply change my behavior and then look for another outlet because of the fact that I hadn't addressed my internal experience and I hadn't taken responsibility for the way I'm feeling. So with the Desteni I process, I've realized that obsessive compulsive disorder, CSP, dermatillomania, is not something that's a separate entity necessarily, that it can be compartmentalized. It is something that your daily moment-to-moment activity feeds and creates and generates. So you can't simply separate it and treat it as a separate issue in your life. You really have to look at how you're living and how you're comporting yourself, how you're dealing with things in your life that's creating these reactions inside of me that's then causing me to look for an outlet. So with the I process and the writing that I do, I'm able to make hundreds of small changes because I see that it's the way I'm living and the way I'm thinking that's causing this. So I've been looking aspect by aspect at things. I'm able to see something play out in my life, for example, an interaction between myself and my boss, where I'll be left with a feeling because of how I handled myself, and that feeling accumulates until, with a bunch of other things that happened that day, until by the end of the day I'm so full of all these reactions that I feel like I just need to escape. Whereas with the writing, I've been giving myself solutions, for example, with my boss, and I'm using this as an example because it's something that actually happened, where I've then written out a solution for myself in how to deal instead with this type of situation. And in the end, through the writing and the self-forgiveness, I've been able to change my relationship with authority figures to one that doesn't cause reactions, to one that doesn't cause an accumulation. It's one that I can let go of in the moment. So now imagine doing that with everything that's contributing to the disorder, one by one, looking at them, writing them out, writing your self-forgiveness, writing your solutions for yourself, and then behaving differently in those moments so that you can let those moments go. By the end of the day, if you're able to do this effectively, by the end of the day you'll be empty. There won't be that build up. And
so it's like you've been running on a script that is called Dermatillomania, and now through writing you're literally rewriting the script of who you are and how you're going to live your life. It's like reprogramming yourself, basically.
Yeah, it is. It's exactly like that. And it's not just writing about the disorder. I have a blog now where I'm focusing on the disorder, but I have another blog where it was a general blog, and the two are the same, because you can't just focus on the disorder and say, I need to stop picking, what's causing this, because what's causing this is everything in your life.
Right.
It's who you are. And so it's re-scripting yourself. It's not changing you're not becoming a different person. You're becoming the same person that you are, but an effective version.
Right.
And it's interesting because just on working on the disorder, I've now been experiencing changes in my life where, if you take the communicating with my boss example, I've actually experienced positive outflows at my job because I'm working on my dermatillomania. So that just shows how dermatillomania affects every aspect of your life. It's not something that's separate that you do at the end of the day in the privacy of your own home. It's with you all the time, and so you have to look at your all the time and to see how you're creating it. And in finding solutions for dermatillomania, I've been finding solutions for the rest of my life as well.
So would you say that the way that you created dermatillomania in your life was as a way of coping as a child, or have you investigated the origins of how did this start?
Well, it's a bit difficult just because I don't remember when it started. So I've pulled up some memories of the first times that I can remember doing it, but I can't say whether or not that was the first time. But I feel that how I've developed it was in being, and this is something I'd be really interested in speaking with other people who have similar disorders, because I don't know if this is just for me or if everybody experiences the same thing, but for me I felt like it was kind of internalizing reactions. You know how some children and some people are extroverts and some are introverts, and so maybe one child will have a temper tantrum and yell and scream and cry. But for me as a child, I was very quiet and I rarely expressed emotions. I kept it all in. And so I think that it was in internalizing all my emotions and feeling reactions and just being very shy and quiet that on the outside I would appear stoic, whereas on the inside there would be a storm. And I didn't, as a child, have the tools to know how to handle this.
Right.
And so I'm thinking maybe at one point I picked a scab or I picked my skin and I got a little release. And then I did it again and again until I realized that when I do this, I feel something other than what's going on inside of me. And I'm able to, because when the dermatillomania completely removes you from reality. It's like time passes and you don't even realize, and you're like completely isolated. It's almost comforting. It's you don't have to deal with it would be like being on heroin. You know, you're in your own little world, and you're not dealing with anything going on around you. So as a child, I would think that in an effort to escape these things I was feeling inside of me, because I didn't understand any other way, it just so happened that I developed this as a coping mechanism and reinforced it over and over by continuously participating in it until it became something that I became dependent on, and it became something that I felt was bigger than me and out of my control.
We have a question here from Adele, and she's asking, do you notice any specific thought patterns that went along with the addiction, like some kind of fear that might lead up to the picking? And you've actually already expanded on this in how this cycle works, where you will be stressed, for example. And it's interesting what you describe with what you see that you might have experienced as a child in terms of building up emotions inside of you, and then how the pattern will play out today, or that it had played out previously in your life, in your adult life, which is actually exactly the same.
Yeah, it is the same. So just to answer Adele, is that I know a lot of OCD sufferers experience repetitive thoughts, repetitive fears, and for me it's not that. It's not like I have a thought. For example, someone could think, you know, there's germs everywhere, or people even have violent thoughts or sexual thoughts that repeat over and over. That is a way in which dermatillomania is different, at least for me, in that I don't have repetitive thoughts. What I have is reactions, and I would say it's more anxiety, general. You know, it's not the same thing over and over. It's anxiety and stress and fear, and you know, in my writings I've discovered anger as well, being kept in, and then looking for release. And I forget that the second part of your question. After that, you said
You mean Adele's question or my question?
you had followed it up with the fact that it was the same as in my childhood than it is.
Yes, that it's actually the same pattern that repeats itself from when you were a child, which I find fascinating. And it also goes to show that all of this can actually be prevented by children learning effective ways of handling what's going on inside of them, as well as adults being aware and attentive to what's going on with children. Because this is what happens, is that, you know, you have this random experience, this random memory of you know, one time you accidentally picked your skin and that experienced a little release, and that then becomes like an entire life's compulsive disorder, which of course is entirely necessary, because we could actually learn to support ourselves already as children.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like, I wish I had had these tools a long time ago, because with the tools now I'm able to manage the reactions, the anxiety, the fear, and the stress, and release it, for example, within communication,
Right.
or within self-forgiveness, or, you know, I have tools now where I can release this, and so it doesn't build up as much. And if I had known these things as a child, I could have worked on the communication, the expressing, you know, why am I angry right now? Why am I sad? Why am I, because I didn't understand when I was little. And so if a parent, for example, myself, let's say I had a child who had the disorder, I'm now armed with solutions for that, so that I could hopefully prevent my child from walking the same path that I walked. But thankfully I do have these tools now, because although it feels like a really big job, because it's something that has been repeating in me for years. I'm 32 now, and so let's say I started when I was 7. You know, that's a lot of decades that I've been, and there's people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s who still suffer from this. So now it's kind of like a lot of work to go back and fix all the things that I had done to create this disorder in myself. But at least I can breathe in knowing that I have a solution at hand, and that solution is me, is myself. And it is very reassuring, and gives me a lot of confidence that I can walk through this disorder, because my only options aren't just medicine or behavioral treatment. It's self-understanding, and it's, instead of a very cold kind of medical outlook, it's a very gentle process of self-support, which I enjoy. And so here I am, enjoying supporting myself and creating this self-relationship of care and self-intimacy that I'm now using to stop myself from harming myself. And I mean, isn't that the best possible way to do something? You know, like, to me, that's the most natural kind of way to cure yourself, would be to work with yourself and be your own specialist, your own therapist. And I'm not saying that you're not to communicate. I would love to be able to have this type of discussion with other dermatillomania sufferers, so that we could kind of compare notes, in a way, compare experiences. So hopefully one day I can work towards that. But right now is my blog, and I get questions there, and YouTube videos. But I do think that sharing support also will play a big role in shedding light on this condition.
Absolutely, and understanding all the mechanisms. And obviously, if someone is in a position where it is necessary or best to take medication, that doesn't prevent themselves from walking the exact same process that you're walking, with writing and walking the point of understanding how they created this disorder or this addiction.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that medicine can be used. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different degrees of the disorder. So people who are experiencing a very high level of, you know, this disorder affecting their lives, may look to medication. And for me, if I were to reach that stage, I would see the medication as not something that I would want to see as the complete solution, or, you know, maybe use as support to help myself live in this world and society while I walk my process of self-understanding. But everybody's different, and we can't make these recommendations. I'm just talking about personally, if I were to reach that stage, just to not see the medication as the solution.
Right. Kim, we're about to stop the hangout here for today. This was really cool, very informative. Is there anything you would recommend, any tips that you have for others who are suffering from OCDs or from dermatillomania?
Yes. I would definitely recommend familiarizing yourself with the process of writing. There is a free course, and I post it in all my blogs. And to be able to write out, shed light, realize what is going on inside of you instead of being alone in the dark with the disorder. And also one of the other big realizations I made was the fact that this is a decision. And that's something that was a bit controversial because even myself at first saw it as something I couldn't control. And through my writing, I realized that it is a decision that I make. And so now every day, in multiple times a day, I make the decision to behave differently and act differently. And the accumulation of those small decisions I make throughout the day help me make the bigger decisions when it comes to the compulsions that I have to face, usually at the end of the day or throughout the day, to make the decision also to stand and to not submit. So these are things that have helped me incredibly, and they're only things that you can give yourself, and that the understanding, the self-understanding, and the self-realizations involved in coming to these solutions, it comes from writing yourself out on paper in terms of what you're experiencing. And I think that everybody who has this disorder should really consider giving this a try, because for me it's been the only thing that has been a solution that I've seen possible to walk and actually have an effect in my life.
Very cool. So what we're going to do is once this hangout is uploaded, this live recording, is that we're going to put a link to Kim's blogs in the description of the YouTube video. So you can go there and you can actually follow and walk with Kim in her process of walking out of dermatillomania and be inspired by what she writes. It's really awesome and very practical, supportive blogs. So I definitely suggest reading those. And then, of course, you can also join us at the Desteni Forum, where you can come and create an account and share your writings there, as well as ask any questions if there's anything that you're wondering about. Of course, you can also do that to Kim. We're going to share Kim's Facebook link as well in the description of the video. And then Kim was mentioning a free course, which is, of course, the Desteni I Process Lite course. That's a free online do-it-yourself course where you will simply learn how to utilize writing to support yourself, to understand how your mind works, how reactions work, how emotions and feelings and thoughts affect you on a daily basis, and really get to know yourself so that you can be able to become that tool that can step out of and stop an addiction, which is, like you're saying, Kim, it's really awesome to be your own tool in this process.
Yeah.
So, Kim, thank you so much for joining us. Very cool hangout. And to everyone, we will be back on our regular schedule on Thursday, where the topic will be effective sleeping patterns, how to create an effective sleeping pattern for yourself. So that should be very interesting. Thanks so much for being here, Kim. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.